I want to start with something most people don't notice until it's already happened to them. There are people walking around right now who used to be the first to help, the first to listen, the first to show up. And somewhere along the way they didn't become cold, they didn't become bitter, they just became quiet. Not withdrawn in the way you'd expect from someone who's been hurt, not angry, not resentful, just selectively present. They're still kind, still warm when they choose to be. But there's something different now. Something most people can't name. They built something invisible between their heart and the world. And if you've felt this shift inside yourself, if you've noticed you can no longer give the way you used to, not because you don't want to, but because something in you simply won't allow it anymore, then what I'm about to share will make sense of something you've been carrying alone for too long. If this is landing somewhere deep, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps this reach the people who need to hear it. And if you're someone who's learned to protect your kindness without losing it entirely, subscribe because we're building something here for people like you. Drop a comment too, even just one word that describes how this feels. I read them all. This shift, this emotional recalibration, it's not something that gets talked about in therapy sessions or self-help books the way it should. It doesn't have a trendy name. It doesn't get diagnosed. But it was understood, studied, and mapped decades ago by a psychologist named Mary Ainsworth. She didn't call it bitterness. She didn't call it emotional unavailability. She saw it for what it actually is, a sophisticated relational adaptation. Ainsworth spent years studying attachment, the way humans bond, the way they learn to trust or stop trusting. And what she discovered was that some people don't close off because they're damaged. They close off because they're intelligent. Their system learned something that can't be unlearned. When kindness stops being safe, when generosity becomes a liability, when being good to people starts to feel like handing them a weapon, the nervous system doesn't ignore that. It adapts. And the adaptation isn't cruelty. It's containment. Your kindness didn't disappear. It just went into a vault that only opens under very specific conditions now. People around you might say you've changed. They might say you're not the same person anymore. They might even say you've become distant, guarded, maybe even a little cold. And here's the thing. They're not entirely wrong. You have changed. But not in the way they think. What they're reading as coldness is actually boundary intelligence. What they're interpreting as distance is emotional conservation. What feels like shutting down to them is you finally waking up to the fact that not everyone deserves access to your inner world just because they ask for it. You didn't become less. You became more selective. And that selection process, that wasn't a choice you sat down and made one day. It was something your system did for you because it had to. The environment you were in, whether it was a relationship, a family dynamic, a workplace, or even a friendship circle, it taught you something brutal. It taught you that being kind doesn't protect you. It taught you that empathy doesn't guarantee care in return. It taught you that the more you give, the more people assume they can take. You were in a relational system that rewarded invasion, where people mistook your openness for an invitation to extract, where your willingness to show up was read as obligation, where your gentleness was taken as weakness. And for a long time, you probably didn't even realize it was happening. You just kept giving because that's who you were. Until one day, something inside you said no more. That moment, the one where it all shifts, it's not dramatic. There's no big fight. No breakdown. No explosive confrontation. It's quieter than that. It's the moment you realize that being good didn't protect you, that caring deeply didn't make people care about you, that your presence, your energy, your love, it was being spent in places that would never refill you. And in that moment, something in your attachment system reorganizes itself, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of survival. You don't stop loving. You stop offering love where it's not safe. You don't stop caring. You stop letting people who don't care about you convince you that you're responsible for their emotional experience. The bond between your kindness and the world didn't just crack. It was severed. And your system built something new in its place. Now you can be in a room full of people and feel completely alone. Not because you're isolated, but because you've learned that presence doesn't equal safety. You can have conversations, smile, help, listen, show up, and still feel like you're operating from behind glass. Not because you don't feel, but because feeling without protection became too dangerous. You learned that vulnerability in the wrong hands doesn't bring connection. It brings exploitation. So now you're kind, but you're not available. You're warm, but you're not open. You're present, but not penetrable. And that's not a flaw. That's not dysfunction. That's an incredibly advanced form of self-preservation that most people never develop. Mary Ainsworth would recognize this immediately. She'd call it a reorganization of attachment style. She'd explain that what you're experiencing is your emotional system doing exactly what it's designed to do when the environment proves unsafe. You're not broken. You're adapted. You didn't close your heart. You fortified it. You built what I'm calling emotional armor, not the kind that makes you hard or cold, but the kind that makes you discerning, the kind that makes you unavailable to people who haven't earned access, the kind that keeps your softness intact by refusing to offer it indiscriminately. This armor isn't the end of your sensitivity. It's the beginning of your sovereignty. Think about the person who was always the listener, the one everyone came to when they needed to vent, to process, to unload. But when that person needed to be heard, suddenly everyone was busy. Think about the person who showed up for every crisis, every late-night call, every moment of need. But when they were falling apart, no one checked in. Think about the person who became the emotional safe space for others but never had one for themselves. That's not hypothetical. That's a pattern. And if you lived it, your body remembers. Your system remembers. And it decided it wasn't going to keep participating in that arrangement. Here's what most people don't understand about emotional energy. It's finite. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup, not because it's a nice metaphor, but because it's physiological. Your nervous system tracks relational reciprocity. It knows when you're giving more than you're receiving. It knows when your care is being consumed without return. And when that imbalance becomes chronic, your system doesn't ask your permission to adjust. It just does. The armor isn't something you built consciously. It's something your body built for you while you were still trying to be good to people who didn't deserve it. And now that it's there, you can't just take it off. Because it's not a costume. It's a feature of your new emotional architecture. There's an archetype that emerges from this process. It's the person who is deeply, powerfully kind, but only in spaces where that kindness is met with respect. It's the person who can be profoundly vulnerable, but only with people who've proven they won't weaponize it. It's the person who loves hard, but no longer loves indiscriminately. They're not avoidant. They're not fearful. They're selectively deep. And that selectivity, that's not a limitation. That's wisdom. Most people confuse openness with health. They think the goal is to be accessible to everyone, to give everyone a chance, to never close off. But that's not health. That's depletion dressed up as virtue. Real emotional health is knowing who gets access and who doesn't. It's knowing that your inner world is sacred, and not everyone has earned the right to walk through it. The armor you built doesn't mean you stopped being kind. It means you stopped being kind to your own detriment. It doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped caring for people who demonstrated they don't care about you. It doesn't mean you shut down. It means you woke up. And waking up after years of being used for your gentleness, it doesn't look like bitterness, it looks like boundary clarity. It looks like self-respect. It looks like someone who finally understands that their energy is not a public resource. Your relationships now, they're different. Fewer people. Less surface-level interaction. More silence, more space, more observation before engagement. You're not performing openness anymore. You're not trying to prove you're good. You're just existing. And the people who resonate with that version of you, those are the ones who stay. Everyone else fades. And that fading, it doesn't hurt the way you thought it would. Because the version of you that needed everyone to like you, that needed to be available to everyone, That version is gone. Not because you killed it, but because it was unsustainable. It collapsed under its own weight. And what rose from that collapse is someone who understands that connection without safety is just exposure. Kindness without reciprocity is just extraction. Love without respect is just use. Let me say this clearly so there's no confusion. Your kindness was used. Not accidentally. Not in some vague, unintentional way. It was used. People saw your softness and decided it was theirs to consume. They saw your willingness to help and turned it into expectation. They saw your empathy and mistook it for weakness. And over time, you learned. Not through logic, not through therapy, not through a book or a podcast. You learned because your body refused to keep letting it happen. Your system built protection because your mind wasn't going to. And now here you are. Not cold, not closed, not broken, just careful, just guarded, just selective. And that's not something to fix. That's something to honor. If you're watching this and you feel like you can't give the way you used to, if you feel like something fundamental shifted inside you and you can't go back, if you're kind but no longer available, warm but no longer open, caring but no longer accessible, I need you to hear this. Nothing is wrong with you. You didn't fail at connection. You succeeded at self-preservation. You didn't become damaged. You became discerning. The part of you that once believed everyone deserved your heart, that part didn't die. It just grew up. And growing up in a relational sense means understanding that your tenderness is not for everyone. Your depth is not for everyone. Your care is not for everyone. And the people who make you feel guilty for that, the ones who say you've changed, who say you're not who you used to be, they're usually the ones who benefited most from your lack of boundaries. You don't owe anyone the version of you that didn't know how to protect itself. You don't owe anyone access just because they're used to having it. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you're different now. You're allowed to be selective. You're allowed to be private. You're allowed to reserve your emotional energy for people and spaces that actually refill you. That's not selfishness, that's survival. That's intelligence, that's emotional maturity in a world that punishes people for having it. Some people don't become cold. Some people don't shut down. They just learn, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once, where their heart is safe and where it isn't. And once that lesson is learned, once that armor is built, it doesn't come off. It just becomes part of who you are. Not a wound, not a scar, just a feature. A form of protection so subtle that most people won't even notice it's there. But you'll feel it. Every time someone reaches for you and you instinctively pull back. Every time someone tries to access you and you feel that internal wall go up. Every time you choose silence over explanation, distance over engagement, solitude over surface-level company. That's not you being difficult. That's you being safe. And safety after everything you've been through, that's not optional anymore. It's non-negotiable. If this resonated, if it named something you've been carrying without words, leave a comment, even just one word. I want to know I'm not talking into the void here. And if you're someone who's learned to protect your kindness without losing it, subscribe. This space is for you. It's for people who didn't become hard. They just became wise. People who didn't close off. They just became selective. People who didn't stop loving. They just stopped offering love where it's not wanted, where it's not valued, where it's not safe. This is not a space for people who want you to go back to who you were. This is a space for people who understand that who you are now, guarded, boundaried, selectively kind, that's not a lesser version. That's an evolved one. That's the version that survived. That's the version that learned. That's the version that built something rare. An emotional armor that doesn't harden you. It just makes you harder to misuse. And if that's you, if you recognize yourself in this, then stay. Because we're not here to fix what isn't broken. We're here to honor what was built in the aftermath of being too kind in a world that didn't know what to do with that, except take advantage.